I'm Scott Lucas. This is today's EAWorldView on Syria. What will the United States do after the Geneva conference fails? First, the easy part of this analysis. On January 22nd, 30 countries will meet to discuss the Syrian conflict in Switzerland. The United States and Russia leading the conference will ask for some sort of agreement that could lead to a resolution of the conflict. Nominally, a transitional governing authority, and a ceasefire. That effort will fail. It will fail because almost no one of significance from the opposition and the insurgency will be at that conference. They will not attend because they will not have a guarantee that President Assad will step down from power. Leading countries will also not be at the conference, including Iran, vetoed by the United States. The fact is that this conference is a sham. It does not have the key people who can make a deal, the key people who have to make a deal to end the military conflict and to bring about supposedly this transitional governing authority. Now, when that happens and there is no ceasefire, what does the United States do next? Here's the hard part with an even harder answer. After some very difficult decisions and deliberations, the United States will probably, in the next few months, accept that President Bashar al-Assad, the dictator who supposedly gassed his own people only last August, who has killed tens of thousands of his own citizens, he will be allowed to stand for re-election in 2014. And of course, given the nature of elections, he will win. Why do I say that? The simple fact is the United States has no options after the failure of this conference. All they can do is keep on calling for a ceasefire. But a ceasefire isn't going to be possible. We know that. And that means that the Americans have to make a decision. They have to go one of two ways, either with the Saudis or with the Russians. With the Saudis means continuing to back the insurgency, including the key bloc of the Islamic Front, providing non-lethal military assistance to the Islamic Front as well as to the Free Syrian Army. It in effect means supporting a continued fight against Assad by groups who will not stop unless there is regime change. Now, the Americans can either do that or they can go the Russian way. And the Russian way is also quite simple, that there can be no condition that Assad has to step down from power, that if he wishes, he can indeed stand for election next year. He can keep elements of the regime, including his brother, who leads Syria's military forces or key parts of it. He can keep his intelligence services. In other words, we're not talking about regime change, but regime continuity, and even to an extent regime support. As I said, there is no third way. And the United States at this point is so concerned about so-called extremists, jihadists, amongst the insurgents, that in effect it is stepping further and further back from them. Because it does not see a supposedly, quote, moderate alternative amongst the insurgency, it will continue to be in effect, if not led with the Russians, following along a couple steps behind. Don't expect this to be immediate. Don't expect the Americans to come out, for example, and tell the Friends of Syria International Group that their long-standing demand, going back to 2012, for Assad's departure is no longer valid. Don't expect a public declaration from Obama that all is forgiven for the man who, I will remind you, was accused of carrying out chemical weapons attacks only 5 months ago. Instead, this will be done behind the scenes. It will be done gently. The Russians will take the propaganda lead, condemning the extremist. The Iranians will help them, by the way, and so will the Syrians. But it's the Russians who will have the diplomatic high ground, and gradually more and more, the Americans will join them on that ground. This past week, meeting Foreign Minister Lavrov in Moscow, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry pulled out a couple of Idaho potatoes from a dirty bag and gave them to his bemused Russian counterpart. Everybody had a field day with that because, quite frankly, it looked like a stupid PR stunt. Behind that PR stunt, however, is something far more serious, not a matter for any kind of laughter. And that is, the United States is going to pull out more dirty potatoes over the next few months. And more what you're going to see is that The fool, if there are fools being made of, are those who actually began protesting against the Assad regime in 2011. And the person who will come out victorious, if still being quite dirty, is Bashar al-Assad. I'm Scott Lucas, and this has been today's EA Worldview on Syria.